My name is Chas Jones, and I'm the Oregon Protective Security Advisor from the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. I brought my fan base with me, okay? And I'm trending right now on social media, if you guys don't know, so make sure you hit me up there and follow me. Actually, I don't. That's all joking. I'm excited to be here in person. We've done 2 years virtually, and we've moved past that. So, let's give all of us a big round of applause for getting through all those virtual team meetings, because I'd much rather be here in person. I'm going to be around for the day, and so are many team members. If you guys have questions about any of the presentations or briefings, please be sure to ask us. And again, it's our honor and privilege to be a part of this event and to support this event. And we can't really thank University of Oregon enough for continuing to support this event. It's a big investment for them, big time commitment. There's many staff members that are behind the scenes coordinating tons of things that you guys aren't even aware of, but they do a fantastic job, and we really appreciate all that they do. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to José, who's got much more important things to say than I do, but welcome, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Chas. So, welcome to the 5th Annual Summit, Oregon Cybersecurity Summit. This time, we're here, we're live, we really miss you all. It's great to have you back. This is the part that we really enjoy. It's just bringing the community together and trying to get some things going for us. As you can see, the theme for this year is building a strong cyber workforce, women and diversity on cybersecurity. And this is a component that is pretty close to my heart. I mean, I have 2 daughters. So I really want to make sure that they understand that they can do anything that they can do without any restrictions. Today, when you look at the statistics, anywhere from 20 to 24% of the cybersecurity workforce is represented by women. I am happy to say that for this registration, we actually broke that number, and we have 28% of the attendees represent themselves as women. So this is a great shout out. So at least we're meeting that. So I'm very happy with that. I also want to thank our partners that help us put this together. You heard from Chas from the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, longtime partners of ours, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Oregon Titan Fusion Center, and the Technology Association of Oregon. Along with the University of Oregon, we have been putting this together for 5 years now. So this is a great venture that we have together. Also, I want to make sure that we recognize that the event is also possible because of our sponsors. So a shout out to our sponsors. For this year, our gold sponsors are SentinelOne and Microsoft. And SentinelOne is also sponsoring our social event at the end of the day. So if you can make the time to stop and have an even more informal conversation with all of us, please stay. That will be a great moment for us to chat a little bit more. Our silver sponsors are Cisco Systems, CDW Government, and Proofpoint. And Cisco Systems helps us this year put together the Oregon Cybersecurity Challenge Cup, which is a capture the flag event that tries to bring together high school students, college students, 2 years or 4 years, and also professionals around Oregon, and work together to solve some challenges and problems. Our bronze sponsors this year are CrowdStrike, Elastic, Enabling Technologies, Juniper, and Palo Alto Network. So with that, I would like to thank our sponsors. Just a quick round of applause. So they really serve it. I also would like to provide a special thank you to Tony Saxman and Haley Berry and the whole information security office team. They have been worked super hard after finishing the World Athletics Championships back in July. They basically just turn around and started putting this event together. There is a lot of moving parts that we need to track, And I'm very grateful for having them as my team members. So special thanks to them, please. So a little bit of logistics. So as you can see, we really have a great lineup. Things are a little packed. It's kind of hard, so much information, so much great information that we want to make sure that everybody really gets it. So, but what we have made sure is that we allocate time for you to network between every breakout session. There'll be about 15 minutes that you can just chat with each other, chat with our sponsors, see what is there to be, what's new, what are they coming with, and talk to your other attendees and participants. This is the whole idea of the event, is to build networking. It's for us to know each other, to understand, put a face to somebody that I work with on a regular basis. It's really build that community. The event is divided between, we have 3 rooms, so we have 3 tracks, one for cyber technical, one for cyber physical, and one for general cybersecurity awareness. And they will happen in different rooms. If you picked up an agenda, it tells you the rooms where you need to go for each of those. But we will always come back here for the plenary sessions. So with that in mind, and done, at the end of each presentation, we're asking you to please fill out a survey to tell us how we are doing. How was that session? Was it useful? Can we improve? What can we change? So we really want to listen to you to help us make this event stronger. And with that, hey, enjoy the summit, all right? Thank you. And interesting enough, if you didn't notice, I'm also sort of the master of ceremony for this thing. So I have a different set of color cards here that I'm going to now start throwing around them over here. So, very good. So this is the event. I now would like to introduce you the University of Oregon Senior Vice President for Finance and Administration and our Chief Financial Officer, Jeremy Moffitt. Please, Jamie, come to the stage to give us a warm welcome in the name of the university.
Thanks, Jose. I am really happy to be here today and to welcome you all to this conference. I'm sorry we don't have a less smoky day for you, but the good news is you're in one of our newly renovated facilities, so hopefully the HVAC will do its good work of keeping the air clean. So interestingly, last weekend, I was actually on the East Coast. I had a reunion with some of my college roommates, which was fantastic. And one of the things we were talking about was how much our experience had changed from those of students today. And in particular, we were talking about technology. So I went to college in the late 80s. And we did not have cell phones, we did not have iPhones, we did not have iPads. There were some computers, I'm not quite that old. I actually didn't have a computer, one of my college roommates did. But we really did not have those wonderful tools that are available today. And just thinking about how much technology has enhanced our ability as an institution to support research and teaching and service is just incredible. But obviously that has opened up some incredible exposure and risk to us on the cyber security front. And as an executive on this campus, I can share that these issues have become very front of mind in a way that they really weren't probably even 5 years ago for many of us in senior leadership. And just as an example of that, every year one of the things that I do is I co-chair our process for determining strategic investments at the university. So we don't have a big budget, we don't have a lot of available funds, and what we end up doing each year, and this may sound odd to those of you that are not in higher education, but we actually create a committee of about 20 or 22 people. It includes faculty members, students, and staff, and we ask everybody across campus through their leadership teams to submit proposals of things that we might need to do on campus that are critically important going forward. And we typically get far more proposals than we could possibly fund. But what I can share with you is the last 2 cycles that we've gone through that process, both pre and during the pandemic, cybersecurity has actually been one of the top asks and one of the top recommended investments that went to the provost from the committee. And this is not a committee of technology folks, this is not a committee of admin folks, it's actually faculty and students that are recognizing the importance of this. So Very important and definitely something that's top of mind for all of us. Obviously, or I shouldn't say obviously, we have limited budgets to deal with these issues, limited resources, and so I think opportunities like this, when we can work with each other, share best practices, work together to try to recruit diverse, talented folks into the workforce are very, very important. So I know you all are very busy. You have lots of demands on your time. I really appreciate that you decided to take today to be here with your colleagues. And looking at the agenda, it seems like you have a terrific lineup of presentations and discussions. I do want to add my thanks to all of the speakers and the conference organizers that have put this together. I think you're going to have a great day, and welcome to our campus. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. I really appreciate it. Next, I'm very happy to welcome Abhijit Pandit, our Chief Information Security Officer. Chief Information Officer.
Bosses tend to have that effect on their employees sometimes. So my name is Abhijit Pandit. Easy way to remember that is Abhi with the G, so Abhijit is right there. I'm the Vice President and the Chief Information Officer here at the University of Oregon. Welcome. I see that you have a really packed lineup, but I sincerely hope you get a chance to walk around the campus. The students are back. Last couple of weeks, there's a vibrancy here. And the street fair is going on, and you may or may not be aware, this is actually an official arboretum. So we have about 4,000 trees of about 500 species spread over 295 acres. So please, when your break time or after the event, walk around, enjoy the place, and in the future also, you're always welcome here. When I think about security, there are three things that come to mind. One is trade-offs. So security and convenience tend not to go hand in hand. And I think that need not be the case. So how can we think about ways of reducing the friction as we start ramping up the amount of security that we need to provide our customers? The second thing that comes to mind is around the ability for us to use technology in ways that it can learn from itself. So I'll put that in perspective. Initially, it was very easy for us to find out phishing scams or social engineering because there was really rudimentary English sometimes or typos all over the place, different fonts. Now it's almost like it's done AI on itself and become much more sophisticated, much more hard to figure out, and it can even fool the most educated users. So how do we use technology in a way that it reduces that cognitive burden on our customers as well, so that we don't have to think about what it is that we click, and we feel safe and secure in the way that we operate. And finally, the sense of community. This is truly a place where we could learn from each other and share our learnings with one another. So how can we create this environment where we can become better together? So I'll give you an example. During the World Championships, I sit on the board of Link Oregon. We actually asked all the board members to have their cybersecurity teams ready just in case we had an event, and everybody said yes. I think that's the kind of community we need to build, and that's the kind of environment we need to foster. And I'm going to end, and before I end, let me also take a moment to thank all the presenters and the panelists for the day, all our sponsors who've been very generous with their support of the event, the team members, the staff members, volunteers who've helped, students who've helped make this possible, and you all for attending. Now, people always say that the hardest session is typically the session before a break or the session before the end of the day. I think this is the hardest session, when you're the one standing in front of, you're the one in between you all and an incredible lineup of speakers and an incredibly packed and informative day for you all. So let me not take any more of your time and turn it over to the man of the hour, which is Mr. Nitin Natarajan, who is the Deputy Director for CISA. Nitin?
Hey, thank you, Abhijit, my boss, the Chief Information Officer. I do know that. So next, I really would like to say a couple of words before I invite the Deputy Director of CISA to the stage. I'm very happy to have you here. We're looking forward to a really nice and candid conversation. Mr. Natarajan serves as the Deputy Director of CISA, And in this role, he supports the CISA director in overseeing the Cybersecurity Division, the Infrastructure Security Division, the National Risk Management Center, and the Emergency Communications Division. Prior to joining CISA in February 2021, Mr. Natarajan served as an executive at a consulting firm and served in federal, state, and local government roles. Mr. Natarajan started his career spending 13 years as a first responder in New York, including service as a flight paramedic. Please help me welcome to the stage Mr. Nitin Natarajan. Good morning, Director. So it's great to have you back here, this time in person. We did, for those who didn't attend last year, the Director was a keynote speaker last year when we did it online. So we were really happy when he accepted our invitation and attend this year. So happy Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And I know that this is a theme for CISA, See Yourself in Cyber. What do you mean? I mean, what is the purpose? What does that mean, and what would you like people to take from that?
Great. So first, thanks for the opportunity to be here today, and it's great to be here in front of human beings again, and actually see people and be able to see them face to face, and to talk about Cybersecurity Awareness Month, which really is an exciting month. We want every month to be Cybersecurity Awareness Month, but we really kind of focus on it in October. See Yourself in Cyber really is a three-pronged approach, right? So I think one is we look at all of you as individuals, that every single one of you has a role to play in cybersecurity. In your day-to-day lives, every single one of you has a role to play in cybersecurity. And whether that is when you choose a bank, you choose a bank that uses multi-factor authentication or a bank that doesn't. As you buy more devices that connect to the internet, some people have internet-connected refrigerators these days. I don't know what they do differently from my refrigerator, but we buy them, right? And we connect more and more things to the internet. Are you looking at the security and the safety of these devices, as you make these purchases? Are you taping your passwords to your keyboards? Hopefully not. But we still see people doing things like that. So how do we change your daily behavior as individuals in your home life? The second part really looks at those software and hardware manufacturers and developers. Are you building in security up front? And how do we really build security in by design? How do we make sure that we are putting out the most safe and secure products we can and building that security aspect in there? So as we look at things like password changes, right? When we did a lot of password changes, it's easier for us to convince a software developer to force a password reset every 30 days or password change every 30 days than it is for us to convince 300 million people across the country to change their password every 30 days, right? So there's that industry aspect of it. And the third leg of See Yourself in Cyber really is recognizing that each and every one of you has a potential career in cybersecurity. And whether you're a network defender, really kind of very technical hands-on keyboards, or supporting the cyber mission in your respective fields. Whether you're in healthcare, the energy sector, and retail commerce, the financial sector, how do you look at what you do with that cybersecurity lens? And there truly is a role for everybody. And whether you're coming out of high school, going into the workforce, whether you're coming out of colleges and universities, whether you're coming out of trade schools, whether you're mid-career, late career, reskilling and upskilling, there truly is a role for everybody in cybersecurity. And for folks to see that and to see themselves in that cyber security mission space across the nation and across the globe.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, this is great to hear. So it's been a year since we last spoke. And as you heard from Jamie, institutions like the University of Oregon are making some investments on cybersecurity. Can you update us on what the cybersecurity threat landscape looks like today? And is there any specific threats that we should be aware in our state, in Oregon?
Sure. So I'd offer that I think the landscape continues to get more dynamic. It continues to get more complicated. The threat actors that we're dealing, both nation-state threat actors and cyber criminals and cyber terrorist organizations, truly are getting more complex, right? And it's becoming easier. As we look at who is a target, right? And we look at 5-10 years ago, the perception was always, I'm not a large city. I'm not a state government. I'm not the federal government. I'm not the FBI. I'm not the intelligence community that people are going to try to hack. I'm not the Defense Department. And so I'm not a target. And I think what we've seen, especially over the last 12 months, but over the last couple of years, and continuing to intensify, is that everybody is a potential target. And whether that's individuals, whether that's corporations, whether that's school districts, whether it's universities, across the board, everybody is a potential target. When we look at what we're seeing, especially in the ransomware attacks, it's not just big cities. We're seeing small rural school districts being attacked. We're seeing individuals being attacked. So that landscape is changing. The other big game changer I think we've seen really kind of grow over the last 12 months is ransomware as a service. So when we think about the traditional threat actor we're facing, we're talking about, again, these organizations that have technical competency, right? They've hired or they've trained or they've recruited the right type of people. Where ransomware as a service, you don't even need technical capability. You literally need money and somebody that you don't like. And if you have those two things, you can hire somebody to do these attacks for you. They keep a percentage off the top, and you get the rest. So we're even making it easier for people to become a threat actor because they don't need to have that technical acumen anymore. So I think we're seeing that evolution. I think, and then if you combine that with our technological advances, I mean, you combine that with where we're going as a nation on the addition and inclusion of new technology that's internet connected to our workplaces, that attack surface continues to increase, and with that, the threats and vulnerabilities are going to continue to increase as well, which forces us to stay that one step ahead of the adversary.
Wow, okay. A lot obviously has changed, and I've heard about the Shields Up program that CISA has and the campaign that comes with it. What does that mean, for your state and local partners? What are you looking forward to see?
So I think the Shields Up campaign started about a year ago, right around at the time when the Russia-Ukraine conflict was starting and churning, to really get people to lean forward in their cyber defensive posture and to put their shields up, to be more aware of what they're seeing on their networks, what potential incidents could occur, and really trying to get that awareness out there. And I think a lot of it is really, again, convincing folks that they're potential targets for an adversary, and making sure that they're taking the steps that they can within their respective organizations to increase that security posture. Now, I think the challenge is, it's very easy for me to sit, listen, I'm coming here from the Beltway, it's very easy for me to sit here and pontificate, right, and say, you should keep your shields up, and you should do this, and you should do that. And that's great, and that's easy to say if you're a multi-million-dollar corporation that has a CIO shop of hundreds of people. It's a very different posture when you're a small business. It's a very different posture when you're a local community that doesn't have that type of infrastructure, that doesn't have that type of resources, that doesn't have that type of staff to do that type of an operation. So the other aspect of Shields Up that we really try to focus on is how do we identify free tools and resources and capabilities that folks who don't have those resources can then incorporate into their infrastructure. Now, we recognize with that is also is a time commitment, which a lot of folks don't have. But how do we make it easier for individuals to institute security practices and make it easier for them to raise their resilience? And ultimately, by doing that across the nation, we're able to make it harder for the adversary, more expensive for the adversary to actually conduct those attacks. And that's really what it's about. It's about raising that bar of resilience, and each and everything that each and every one of you do day in and day out help raise that bar a little bit. And as long as we're continuing to raise that, I think we're in a good place.
All right. Great, thank you. So you did mention the Russia and Ukraine conflict. I can relate to that. This summer, we were running the World Athletics Championship, and everything was going perfect until Russia decided to invade Ukraine. And the World Athletics Organization decided to ban Russia from participating. So that really changed the landscape of what we needed to do to really protect us, because that really became a target for our adversaries. So as you're thinking about, and we're talking about cyber infrastructure, our critical infrastructure, how it's being threatened, what do you see as the most pressing threat that we need to start looking at right now, or what's coming in the future?
So I think from a threat perspective, I think it's the frequency and complexity of attacks. So I think the types of attacks and the types of defenses we need are going to remain the same, but that complexity of those attacks is going to change and evolve over time, and the frequency of attack is going to evolve over time. So to me, when we look at our nation's critical infrastructure, it's how do we really keep one step ahead of the adversary? How do we make sure we're making those investments? How do we make sure we're we're looking at how best we can protect those networks and systems. As we introduce new industrial control systems, as we kind of modernize a lot of the infrastructure across the nation, how do we make sure that we're doing that and building security into those efforts up front, right? Right now we're on the verge, through the IIJA funding to get a lot of infrastructure investment around the nation. How do we build cybersecurity into that investment up front versus kind of adding it on at the end? So really looking at that aspect of it. I think the other piece that CISA is very heavily involved in is really looking at supply chain vulnerabilities and cascading impact vulnerabilities as well. So if there is an incident at a water treatment plant, at a healthcare facility, at an energy substation, what is that cascading impact to other critical infrastructure, and what is that impact to residents in those communities? And then how best do we help respond to those types of events if they were to happen?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I can relate to the fact that things keep changing. So we keep doing things. We introduced multi-factor authentication. We saw a revamp of really social engineering to try to get users to provide an authentication for two-factor, just using social engineering. So the challenges continue to show up, and we need to adapt to those. So it seems to be like a kind of a cat and mouse sort of game. So I heard about the Cyber Incident Reporting for Critical Infrastructure Act that was signed into law earlier this year and includes a new incident reporting requirement. So what is CISA's role in implementing those requirements, and where are you in that process?
Sure, so we're really excited about CIRCIA. So this is new authorities that we got through the National Defense Authorization Act earlier this year in January. What CIRCIA is going to allow us to do is to create a rule that will require mandatory reporting within 72 hours of a cyber incident. And where this is truly is beneficial is it's not just about the federal government collecting information and putting it in some magic database that we may or may not ever look at. We want to collect this information truly to turn it back around and to help. So what do we do? So if a company is attacked, we work closely with the FBI, with the intelligence community, with partners around the globe to really understand the nature of that attack. So if a company calls us and says we go to a company and say you've been a victim of an attack, we'll often work with our partners at the FBI, we'll make that notification. The more that we can learn about the technical indicators of compromise, the method of attack, and a lot of those types of details, we actually take that information back with our cybersecurity experts. We work with industry partners, we work with academia, we work with folks around the globe, with the intelligence community here in the US, the DoD and others, to put together how do we mitigate against this, right? So how do we understand the attack, and what are those mitigation steps that we recommend that people take? And then what we're able to do is take that outcome and share it back out with not just the individual that was a victim, but with their partners and colleagues across the nation or around the globe, so that they can then go in and assess, were they also victims of the attack? And or what mitigation steps can they take to prevent from becoming a victim of a similar attack? So it truly is, I think, where CIRCIA is going to be a game changer. It allows us to really take information in, but most importantly, to get information back out in a timely manner. Because that clock, once that notification happens, until the time we can get mitigation information out there and implemented, is a window for other attacks to potentially occur through the same mechanism. So we really want to focus on how quickly we can receive the information, analyze it, and put that information back out into the community. And CIRCIA is really going to help us do that.
Perfect. So I seem to catch that some of that information might be available to the community, or how do we work with CISA to find out whether there's some patterns there?
So we try to put everything we can on our website. So through CISA.gov, through StopRansomware.gov, to get as much information out there in public as possible. But we also try to get information out there in multiple ways, right? I mean, there's those of you here in the audience who are watching that are extremely technically, tech deep cyber defenders. The information you need is very different than the information that a policymaker needs, that an elected official needs. So how do we make sure we're putting out information that is understandable by different communities? And how do we make sure that folks can act on it in an effective way? So we really want to work on getting very strong technical information out there, but we also want to make sure we're getting information out there that's more strategic, that's more policy focused, information that helps people really understand the risks that they're facing. I think when we talk about risk, we spend a lot of time talking about risk identification. We look at this all the time. We look at the risks that we're facing, and we try to identify those risks. We spend a lot of time on risk mitigation, of how do we mitigate those risks that we've identified. We forget there's a third leg of that stool, which is any risk that we've identified and we have not mitigated, we're accepting. And we always accept some risk. I mean, I walked up a flight of stairs just now. I took a risk walking up those stairs. I did not trip, I did not fall. I sat in this chair and didn't break it. I mean, I take risks every day, but we do it knowing we're accepting a certain amount of risk. I'd offer in cybersecurity, because it's extremely complicated, because for a lot of folks in the policy arena, it seems, they don't even understand. It's hard to understand. We don't even know what risk we're accepting, and we need to understand the risk we're accepting, because we're going to have to accept some risk, but we need to do it more knowingly.
Yeah, that if you have a risk and you're not doing anything, you are really accepting that risk. That's one of those things that as security practitioners, we need to understand, obviously. It's like, know what your risks are and make a statement, make a decision. It could be, yeah, no, we're not gonna do anything, but you know that you're not doing anything. That's pretty clear, as opposed to, I don't even know if there's a risk, or I just gonna look the other way and hope it goes away. They don't go away.
And I think even beyond the security practitioners, I think they get it. It's how do you get the CEOs, the boards of directors, local and state elected officials? How do you get those that, at the end of the day, are the ones accepting the risk, to really understand what they're accepting?
And do they know that they're accepting those risks, right? So that's kind of the job of the CISOs, seems to be. So
CISO does everything.
Yeah. So, the elections have been a hot topic for a little while there, with our adversaries and Russia making some campaigns and inwards in some other countries' elections. And November and the midterm elections just right around the corner. How concerned should we be about our election security? And more pointedly, are our elections safe, Director?
So I say the issue about election security is not a new one. Right, it didn't just evolve this year, it didn't evolve last year. I mean, we've been working very closely with our partners at the state and local level, with groups like the National Association of Secretaries of State, the National Association of State Election Directors, for years on election security. And then kind of across the spectrum of CISA, there's looking at everything from cybersecurity to our physical security portfolio, and working with these organizations, working with local elected officials, local elections officials, I should say, to really help them understand their landscape and to increase their security posture. So this is not anything that's necessarily new. I think we continue to observe and work closely with our state and local partners to watch for any potential compromise. I mean, the FBI and CISA have said that, that the potential for an increase in these types of things exists between now and any election season. But I think, our role is to really work hand in hand with our colleagues at the state and local level to do this, and they've been doing a great job. They've been working, working at this for years. So it's not that they're just focusing on it today. So I think we're in a great place, and we're going to continue to work with them. Not just up to the elections, but for years to come.
Right. And we know that cybersecurity, all of us need to be involved. Is there anything specific that we as citizens should be paying attention to?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, as I mentioned earlier, every single one of you have a role to play in cybersecurity. Every single one of you, frankly, has something to lose, from a cyber attack. Whether you're impacted individually, whether your companies are impacted, whether your churches are impacted, any organization that you work with or for, could be impacted as well. So, the ask we have of everyone is to make sure that what you're doing day in and day out in your life is to have that cyber lens, on, and really look through that cyber lens as you make decisions for yourself, for your organizations, as we go forward. Because until we can get this through, permeated through the nation, it's going to be hard. And I think, how do we also get this into the next generation? How do we get this into children, kind of, and what they're dealing with? And I think, a lot of people tell me that kids these days are very, very cyber savvy. And I think what I offer is I think they're extremely tech savvy, but I don't know how cyber savvy, right? So I have two kids, one's an adult, one's in high school. And the high school is extremely, extremely tech savvy. Extremely tech savvy. I mean, could work with the iPhone around me, run laps around me on my iPhone. But at the same time, she shares her her and her friend circles share their password and their Face ID stuff. So that's tech savvy, but it's not really cyber savvy, right? Now, a little bit less risk, right? I mean, she doesn't have banking information on her phone and all the other kind of stuff, but still, how do we build that in there? And to me, I think back to the old Cold War days, right? We taught an entire generation, if there's a potential nuclear attack in the United States, to hide beneath your desk. Now, right now, listen, I'm not here to tell the efficacy of that as a response apparatus. However, everybody knew how to do it. Right around the country, every single person knew when they heard that sound to dive beneath your desk to protect yourself from a nuclear attack. What is that message, and how do we get cybersecurity across the nation into every school, into every program where people are learning about building in that cybersecurity aspect into everything that they do? They don't have to dive beneath their desks anymore, but what are those things that they can do day in and day out? So that's kind of our ask of everybody, is to really put that lens on and to realize that everybody has a role to play. And I think the other thing I'd ask is definitely want to make sure that I'll make a shameless plug, as we continue to recruit for the cyber workforce. I mean, depending on whose report you read, we're talking about 500,000 or more vacancies and opportunities in the cyber arena. As we bring in new technology into critical infrastructure and into our daily lives, how do we build that in with the right cyber lens? So there's roles and opportunities to really build the cyber workforce as well. So I think you can see yourself both in what you do day in and day out, but you can also see yourself as a career. And I'll make my plug for those who are students. CISA is always hiring. So if you're graduating soon and you're interested, let us know. We'd be more than happy to have that conversation.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I was just going a little bit, because as a cybersecurity practitioner, you can imagine the life of my daughters and their dad telling them how to do it. So I taught them very early what a good password was like. It's not 6 characters or the name of their dog. It's like, think about a passphrase, think about a song. We even made a game out of it, to the point where they would let me know, I came up with the greatest password today for this. So it's fun. So trying to get everybody to start thinking about that, and having them challenge their friends. I mean, I think that's a good opportunity. At the same time, there's a lot of information out there. And I know that CISA has many resources. I've been using, if you haven't noticed it, I'm like, not necessarily the number one, I'm not gonna claim that, but I'm a big fan of CISA. I mean, and all the resources that CISA has been making available to us. I've been doing the cyber hygiene program pretty much since its inception. So that was one of the things that I got to achieve for the university. And there's lots of tools in the CISA portfolio on your website. Which ones would you recommend, for us to tap into, if we could only implement a handful of them?
So I think, and we're actually in the process of redoing our entire website, so it should be a lot different, hopefully, in the coming months. I think it's a hard question, because we really try to have products that are very technical for people like you and your team, and stuff that's very strategic for folks who don't speak that language, that technical language. A few key things that we've put out there that people have really appreciated is things like the known exploited vulnerabilities, the KEV book, which basically looks at what are known exploited vulnerabilities, hence the title, that we're seeing across the nation, across the globe, right? So there's all of those vulnerabilities out there. We can't mitigate every single vulnerability, but what are those vulnerabilities that we know are being exploited, and so that we could focus on that. I think the other big thing is our binding operational directives. So CISA has authority to force the federal civilian executive branch, right? So this is the federal government outside of the Department of Defense and outside the intelligence community, to take action. And when we do that, we're doing it for a reason, right? That there is something urgent that we need the federal government to act on to protect its networks. And so those BODs, while they're only binding to the federal executive branch, we're hoping people will take those and look at how they can implement that within their organizations. So I would offer those two as key things. And then the third part is really a lot of our K through 12 education, right? How do we make sure that we are educating the next generation, and we have a lot of resources out there for that as well.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, as I said, Again, another shameless plug for CISA. So if you have a need for vulnerability scanning and trying to figure out how you're doing, the cyber hygiene program is very effective. It gives you a view of what your adversaries are looking at. So, and it's free to us. So take advantage of that.
Yeah, we have put a lot of free tools and resources out there. Industry has offered a lot of free resources that we are have on our website as well that are not ours, but that industry is offering up free of charge for those, organizations, companies, jurisdictions that don't have a lot of resources to be able to tap into. And we also have on our website, obviously, our connectivity to our 24/7 operations center. So, I mean, it's often hard as a federal employee to navigate the federal government ourselves. It's even harder to navigate the federal government here, right? And trying to understand how DC is set up and what do you do and who do I call and where do I go. So we actually have a one-stop shop that you can reach our 24/7 Ops Center and let us deal with our bureaucracy and let us navigate that bureaucracy and get you to the right individual. So really try to make it easy for folks to engage with us regardless of what the need is, and we can get that directed to the right people.
Okay. Yeah, this is a perfect segue. So large organization, I know that CISA has, it's comprised of regions, right? So what is our region and how should we work with our regional teams?
Sure, so I think one of our great strengths is our regional footprint. So CISA has over 500 people in communities across the nation. We have teams here in Oregon that are focused on helping you raise your resilience against critical infrastructure, both in cyber and physical security. So a bunch of them are actually in the room. So we have Pat Massey in the back, who's our regional director out of Seattle, who covers this whole area. We have Chaz over, one of our protected security advisors. We have Teresa in the back is our state cybersecurity coordinator. Tom Wilder is here, who's one of our other protected security advisors. And I apologize if I'm, Leslie, who's our newest cybersecurity coordinator here in Oregon as well. So we have our team here that's in Oregon, based here in the state that you can engage with. And they're your conduit to the broader CISA community as well. They're the individuals who can come to your facilities, sit down, and have these conversations. So we're continuing to expand our regional footprint in time, and it really is kind of that leading edge. They know the community, they're in the community, they're local, and they're able to engage quickly.
Perfect. Yeah, so this has been a great conversation. And, as we look at the audience, we have individuals pretty much from every segment of our industry and our society here today. And what is the call to action when it comes to our roles in cybersecurity and protecting our national critical infrastructure?
So I think the call to action is to act, right? It really is to not put off till tomorrow, what we need to do today. And we have an adversary that is investing heavily in impacting our nation, right? We have an adversary that is working aggressively on phishing expeditions and campaigns to get money from individuals, from companies, from local governments, from state governments. I'm still a firm believer when it comes to phishing attacks, and maybe I'm just old, but if somebody's going to give me $1 million, they're going to show up at my door with a big check and some balloons, right? No one's going to give me $1 million via email, but people still click on links, right? And the emails, especially in phishing, have gotten more complicated. So I think that how do we make sure that we are not just putting off? Well, I'll deal with that tomorrow, or I'll run that patch tomorrow, or I don't have time for the update now, or I don't want to take down our system today. We're going to wait to the end of the quarter when it's a potentially known exploitation. So really, it's operating quickly and it's operating smartly, but it's also making sure that, again, we're all working together to stay ahead of a very well-resourced, aggressive adversaries, not just one, but multiple around the globe, that are looking to impact our critical infrastructure, to impact us from a monetary perspective. There's a lot of reasons why the threat actors do what they do, and it really is getting that importance out there that we have to be faster, quicker, and smarter than they are.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Deputy Director. for your time this morning. I'm sure that our audience might have some questions, so I'm assuming you have a little bit of time to
Definitely.
address some of those. So if any member of our audience, please just come forward to the mics and just pose a question to the Deputy Director of CISA.
Or we can talk about hockey.
That is one sport we don't really do that well. Soccer would be a good, or football in Eugene. So that's it. Yes, please.
Hi, and welcome to Oregon.
Thank you.
And instead of hockey, we could talk about Go Ducks. I'm Nancy Nathanson. I'm an elected official in the state legislature. I care a whole lot about this topic. I care a lot about interruption of service. For private sector, it's interruption of service to your customers. For public service and public agencies, I worry like heck about interruption of service. And is someone going to be down 2 or 3 days or 2 weeks or 2 months? What can you tell us about the attack on the pipeline, for example, and what that meant to interruption of service in a very major way for the whole eastern seaboard? And what is it we need to do if someone, for example, it is a better idea to take a system down for a few hours or a half a day because you really have to do something urgently to protect. You're supposed to tell now the public, I'm sorry, you don't have access to this public service for a half a day. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So I think that definitely is a challenge, and I think that every CISO, every CEO, every state and local official who's in charge of a public utility, what have you, struggles with that decision, right? What do we take? When do we take it down? How long is it going to be down for? What is the impact? I think what we've seen as we look at Colonial, which was really an attack on the IT system, not necessarily the operational technology system. It was a decision by the company to take it down for a period of time, so that they could remediate and address. I think the challenge is how do we get that more transparent and open communication? How do we build our systems to be more resilient? How do we have the backups in place to be able to continue services in some capacity? And then one of the things that we're really focused on within CISA is really understanding things like the supply chain, understanding cascading impact analysis, understanding the second and third order effects of these types of events. So how do we build our infrastructure into a place where we can take something down for a period of time but not have that disruption? One of the things we're looking very closely at is work we're doing in places like the Houston Ship Channel, right, to understand as we look at fuel supplies and how do we make sure that there's redundancy there. We have a number of programs that we lead. We're doing at least one here in Oregon called RRAPs, Regional Resiliency Assessment Programs, to really understand across the region. So here within the state, how do we look at that cascading impact from an incident to critical infrastructure, to understand what those outages could be, to understand then what mitigation can we take to minimize those potential outages, and then how do we communicate that effectively. So there's a lot that we do kind of pre-incident, really focused on better understanding the resilience of that infrastructure, and then really understanding what steps we can take to mitigate against some of that. We're never going to mitigate against everything, but making sure that we can invest in that mitigation in the appropriate way. And then again, I think there's a huge value in transparency and communication. I think that's why we're really excited about the cyber incident reporting, because again, the sooner we can find out something has happened, the sooner we can actually we can work together with that impacted entity, with the broader federal government and academia and other partners to come up with mitigation and to help restoration be quicker. So that's really why that communication, that dialogue is important, and that's something that we want to continue to do. I'm really thrilled that it's something that you're passionate about, because it is something we want to get more state and local officials, knowledgeable about and passionate about, because it is something that we have to do together. It's not an executive branch issue. It frankly is. It's going to require all of our branches working together to get where we need to be.
William Chapman, Statewide Interoperability Coordinator for Oregon. Can you talk a little bit about the nexus between emergency communications and cyber?
Sure. Definitely. So, when we look at the CISA mission space, we have kind of 4 primary buckets. One looks at physical security, one looks at cybersecurity, the other looks at emergency communications, and then looking at risk. And our emergency communications work obviously works very closely with our statewide interoperability coordinators, our SWICs, to look at emergency communications as it pertains to public safety, as well as 911 centers and PSAPs. And I think as we look at the technological innovations, right, everything has gotten more, everything is IT-based, right? When we look at when I became a first responder many years ago, there wasn't a lot of IT. We didn't have, terminals in our trucks. We didn't have, a lot of our land mobile radios were all kind of the pre-trunked, our phones were POTS lines, they weren't VoIP. Like there wasn't that type of technological innovation back then. Now everything has some type of IT backbone, and with that has some type of vulnerability. So, when we look at cybersecurity, we look at it kind of across the spectrum and making sure that we're able to look at emergency communications risks, both from the physical security side, but also from the cybersecurity side. And I think the states have been great, working with NICSWIC and our SafeCom partners. They really understand the potential risks and vulnerabilities that are out there in the cyber arena and how it impacts them as emergency communications professionals. And it's something we want to continue to make sure we're providing the right support and guidance and products that we can to help that community continue to kind of, again, raise their posture as well. The worst, it's one thing, during a natural disaster when we have impacts of groups like PSAPs and others, but the concept of a potential cyber incident that impacts 911 centers, across the state or across the region definitely is devastating. And so there are fallbacks, right? It's not, people have built-in resilience and they have built-in backups, but how do we work together to raise that resilience so we don't have to rely on those backup systems and capabilities?
Hello, John Stone with Gallatin ITS Local. I have a long history working with Fortune 100. I'm really interested to know, with all the data that you're getting from the attack information, if that's going to be broadly released for data analysis, include information such as industry that was impacted and market that was impacted. Business leaders tend to want to do what their peers are doing, and they're very money focused. I'd like to say what can educate them, but really what they're looking at is, how much is this going to cost me, and is that going to give me a competitive advantage, or if I don't do it, is it a competitive disadvantage?
No, that's a great point. That is one of the things that we're looking at, really getting more information out there on what are we seeing across the threat landscape. It's a very different argument, I think, for a CISO of an organization to go to their CEO and say, I need more money because there are bad actors in the globe. Somebody from CISA came and said there's people around the world who don't like us and they could attack us. Give me more money. Right? Not really a strongly viable argument, right? It's a very different argument when you can come in and say, we need to invest X amount of dollars to upgrade our security posture because there's been X number of attacks against similar types of institutions, in this same geographic area from this type of a vector, and they've implemented these types of things, these types of standards that have saved over the long run this amount of money. So now let's make the investment, right? I mean, it's a very different argument to be made, and whether that's an argument in the private sector or an argument, frankly, in the public sector, right? When you're talking about budgets and you're talking about allocation. So one of the things we're really looking at doing is getting a better handle of not just what do we know in CISA, but what do we know across the federal interagency, working with our partners, and then how do we put some of that together to tell that story more effectively. And essentially, the way I see it, it's about arming all of you with the knowledge and the information you have to make your arguments. The answer at the end of the day is not a DC solution to everybody's problem, right? The answer at the end of the day is arming you with the information you need to make the decisions you need to make for your respective entity in the public or the private sector on how much risk you need to buy down and how much you need to invest within your organization. That investment varies drastically, right? If you're in the financial services industry, it might be a very different calculus than if you're in the agriculture community, right? Based on what you're seeing and the potential impacts. So, we don't want to necessarily sit and dictate what you have to do or you should take these things. We're trying to put out information, things like our cybersecurity performance goals, which are coming out this month, which will talk about kind of what are those ideal goals that people should have, and then we're going to actually do sector-specific ones after that. So we do want to put that type of information out there, but we really want to just arm people with the knowledge and the information to help drive their decision-making, and then allow that decision to be made locally.
Hi, my name is Larry. I'm the cybersecurity manager for Douglas County, and one of my biggest fights right now is with a Fortune 500 company that provides our 911 software, tax software, and they have virtually no competitors. They are passing passwords in plain text. They don't care about security at all. So my question is, how do you try to hold vendors' feet to the fire and actually get vendors to care about security? Mind you, this company was hit by a cyber attack not less than 2 years ago. So they still don't care. You know, it's a cost of operations for them, and they don't care if their customers get hit. So how do you hold vendors' feet to the fire?
So I mean, those are a lot of conversations we're having with vendors right now, is how do they make sure that they're building, security by design into their products, both hardware and software. And it is somewhat of a sea change, right? It is, and I think part of that is market driven, right? I think part of that, in some areas where you do have choice in vendors, it's making sure that you're making an informed decision, that you're understanding where your software is coming from, whether we're looking at our efforts under our software bill of materials, our SBOM efforts, or really knowing that supply chain side, so that you're choosing a vendor that has built in adequate security up front. I think where it gets trickier is, as you've kind of said, in this situation where there aren't other vendors and it's kind of a single entity, that becomes a little bit trickier. But we are trying to engage with industry actively to say, you really need to start thinking about security on the front end of what you're doing and what you're putting out there, because that's how you get the one-to-many, right? The answer on a lot of this is not one-to-one, it's one-to-many, and it's building it into that software package. So those are conversations we're having with industry to try to get them to pivot. Then I think a lot of this, again, is going to be somewhat market-driven, right? When people, the better we can inform the end user and the consumer to put cybersecurity into their thinking when they're choosing a product. This product is a little bit more expensive than this other product, but we feel it has a stronger security posture, so we're going to make that investment. How do we make sure that we're taking that element into the decision calculus?
Hello, my name is Nate. I'm a student at Southern Oregon University. So my question is, what do you think the efficacy of adversary in the middle attacks is, and how common are they from what you see?
I'd offer it's definitely something that's more, how would I frame it? I wouldn't say common. It's becoming more common, right? Something as we look at kind of trajectory and something that is increasing in frequency. I think efficacy is questionable depending on how you want to look at what the desired outcome is. I think it's not, as we're seeing some of our adversaries develop more technical capability, it is becoming a little bit more effective. Not necessarily what we're seeing here, but we're seeing more globally. What I worry about when we look at those types of attacks is how rapidly that potential attack vector is going to increase in the near future, and then do we have the right mitigation steps to go against it? And I think that's an area we're kind of focusing on right now of how do we get a better understanding of what that future is going to hold so we can stay ahead of it. And I'm not sure we're 100% there yet, but we're getting there.
My name is Harley Chappelle. I'm also a student from SAU. I'm like at a very beginner level. There's a lot of new information coming at me. My more question is, when I'm going to develop my career, like say if it were to be inspired cybersecurity, which is looking like where it is, what are like some of the best resources to really help jumpstart me? And do you have any possible advice on how to really solidify my knowledge and ability of cybersecurity?
Sure. So I'd offer that part of it is deciding what aspect of cybersecurity you want to get into. I mean, there's this. I always have this conflict when it comes to folks entering the field, right? There's this perception that we want to hire people into the cybersecurity, new into the field, that know everything about cybersecurity and have 50 years experience. That's not hiring new people into the field, right? So what I would offer is looking kind of across the landscape of what aspect of cybersecurity you want to get into, right? Do you want to get into threat hunting? Do you want to get into vulnerability management? Do you want to get into, into kind of traditional system activity? Like what is it that you want to do? And dive into that. I think I would offer, because the field is so diverse and broad, once you're in, you're not going to stay in the same place, right? You're going to continue to navigate and move around and see different things, be exposed to different things. So the easiest thing you can do is just to get in, right? Is to get some of that fundamental information and to get in. When I look at the backgrounds of people that we're hiring, into our organization, they have such diverse backgrounds and experiences, right? We have people with undergraduate and graduate degrees in cybersecurity. We have people with undergraduate degrees in art. right? But that have gone and taken a couple of classes or gotten a certification and want to enter into the field. It's everything in between. So, people often ask me that same question of, what should I focus on or how do I get in there? And I think to some extent it's, if there's a particular area that you're more interested in than another, and, if you want to go into software development or whatever, other aspects, is to choose that and take that step in. But once you're in, that's really where you're going to start to navigate and see what's out there. I think there's a lot of, are you going to go public sector, private sector? Are you going to go academia? Are you going to go work nonprofit? The federal government we do a lot of cool things working with partners around the globe, with the intelligence community and others, that you're not going to do in other parts of the government. But there's things you're going to do in local government and state government you're never going to do as a Fed, right? And so, what aspect of it really kind of sparks your interest and kind of makes you happy at the end of the day? I think the other thing I'd offer is, because so many more employers are embracing things like remote work, you really have a lot of options when you look kind of around the nation, right, and what you want to get into. The other thing I'd offer to folks is to really consider jumping around, spending time in each of those different perspectives. I've spent time in the private sector, I've spent time in the federal government and state government and local government, and they all have different perspectives, and they all have different challenges. And so the more perspectives you can get, the stronger you're going to build kind of your ability to tackle some of these novel and challenges we're going to face in the decades to come.
Hi, Andrew from Wasco County. Really my question kind of jumps off from Larry's, and it's kind of two-part. One is accountability. There's a lot of conversation around carrot, but sometimes there has to be a stick associated with that, and so I'm curious if CISA is looking at that. Additionally, with the conversation about risk, how is CISA really broadening that discussion from just monitoring internal risks to also those risks that some partner of the community might be passing over to others? For instance, we're a local government entity, right? And so we have a community of partners in our region that are interconnected. And so our risks are a shared risk across those partnerships.
So I think on the shared risk side, I'd offer that basically there's it is, and that's why we look at some of our regional resiliency programs and others, is to really understand where those risks are, where those vulnerabilities are across the spectrum. So these assessments, when we do them, aren't focused on a specific individual entity. They look at the public and the private sector partners in that entire area, right, based on whatever the focus of the assessment is, to understand what those are, then how do they collectively address them, right? So we may identify risks and vulnerabilities in a small business, right, but they just don't have the resources, the capability to mitigate them. How does that community come together to help kind of mitigate some of that? So I think from that perspective, it really is a lot of what we're trying to do is understand risk, not just to a specific entity, but more broadly, and doing both, right? There is value in doing both. It's not an either or, it's really kind of doing them together. So I think the more of the work we're doing is really looking at that broader risk landscape. We're looking at risk also nationally and internationally, especially when it comes to supply chain risk, right? I mean, so we look at supply chain vulnerabilities. I mean, anyone who's tried to order a kitchen appliance in the last year or the last couple of years knows how long it takes, to get some of these things. So how do we best understand those vulnerabilities, those risks, and then how does that factor into resilience and the steps that we need to take to be more resilient? So it's very different to build resilience against something we know we can replace or fix in 24 hours, and it is something we know is going to take a year, right? And so how do we get more visibility into that? A lot of this is, there just isn't the data, so a lot of this is sitting down and having those conversations. Some of this isn't even quantitative in nature, it's more qualitative, and so how do we mix those two worlds together and come up with some strong recommendations and assessments? On the first one, kind of on the carrot stick perspective, CISA is really trying to understand, and we're doing this as part of our rulemaking with CIRCIA, is what does the current regulatory landscape look like, right? So when you look across the 16 critical infrastructure sectors, you have sectors that are already highly regulated when it comes to cyber, right? The financial industry is one. If you look at the healthcare industry, for instance, right? So healthcare is not just hospitals and healthcare delivery, but it's pharma, labs, blood, biotech, health IT, insurance payers, HMOs, medical manufacturing, distribution, supply, right? That entire spectrum that's needed to utilize healthcare. Some aspects of that are regulated, right? When you look at medical devices through the FDA, you look at HIPAA through HHS, there are already some of those regulations that are covering that. So I think as we look at what this needs to, the landscape looks like, we're currently kind of in this fact fighting to really understand what is the current landscape across the 16 sectors, recognizing each sector is very complex. And then on top of that, what is already being proposed, right? A lot of other departments and programs are putting in regulatory measures right now to look at how do they incorporate cybersecurity into existing regulatory programs. We want to see what that looks like. And then really what does that next step look like? And is that CISA's to take or is it somebody else's to take, right? We are not we're not always the right solution, right, to every problem. So how do we find that right solution and then how do we get there? And then also, again, kind of in parallel, because we have things like the cyber security performance goals and stuff coming out this month that are going to be more voluntary in nature, how does that change some of that landscape? And how effective is that? So we are trying to really now just trying to better understand what that landscape looks like. We're doing listening sessions all around the country, really kind of pulling that feedback in so we can make sure that we don't over pivot and that we make sure we make kind of the right informed decisions.
Quick question. Ryan Megish, Statewide Interoperability. Can you talk a little bit about grant opportunities in cybersecurity for the public and private sector, and if those are going to be like a one-time grant or a continuation opportunities?
Sure. So we just released kind of for the first time a cybersecurity grant working with our colleagues over at FEMA. So we have $1 billion over 5 years that's going out there. So we're really excited about getting kind of the grant funds out there. So it is a multi-year effort. I obviously can't speak to what happens on year 6. Hopefully there's continuation. But the thing I'd offer is, as we look at grants, is we've really seen some states take some innovative approaches to utilizing federal grant dollars, right? So instead of looking at, CISA just put out the cybersecurity grant, we're only going to use the cybersecurity grant for cyber. How do we maximize kind of the broader Homeland Security grant programs that FEMA puts out to the states through the state administrative authorities, and how do we leverage some of those dollars? I was meeting with a number of environmental commissioners. One of the things that an environmental commissioner wanted to do in his state was strengthen the cybersecurity of water and wastewater treatment plants from cyber attacks. They felt that there just wasn't a lot of investment in that sector, and they felt it was critical, obviously, to their population. So what they actually did was they had the CISA cybersecurity advisors go out and do vulnerability assessments of those facilities. And then they actually took EPA grant money and leveraged that and gave money to each of the facilities to tackle vulnerabilities that CISA had identified, right? Because the EPA grants and the EPA folks don't have the cybersecurity expertise. We don't necessarily, have money that goes directly into water and wastewater. So they put the two together as an innovative solution to kind of raise their resilience in the water and wastewater sector within their state. So I think that, we continue to see some new grants coming out there, and I think that, we want to continue to maximize that the best we can. But we also want to make sure that we're, again, kind of providing the information so people can make those local decisions as well on where we want investment to be and what do we want that investment to be like. And then really encouraging folks to leverage kind of the broader portfolio of federal grants and to see how they could be utilized to support cybersecurity activities.
Hi, my name is Dennis. I'm a systems admin and tech support specialist in the private sector. I just wanted to, along with the legislation that was passed earlier in this year, there was a bit of a focus on cybersecurity exercises, training, et cetera. I was wondering if CISA was going to be involved in pushing those resources out, and if it was going to be available on the education level, the private sector. And if you are going to be involved, kind of how are you going to do it without reinventing the wheel with what the private sector already offers?
Sure. So in the exercise space, we do a lot of exercise work with state, local, tribal, territorial partners and the private sector on cybersecurity exercises. We'll continue to do that and continue to grow that. We want to get a lot of those exercise resources out to folks so that they can do their own local exercises. I mean, again, when we talk about scale, the answer isn't getting CISA's exercise team out to every 3,000 something communities across the country. Excuse me, but how do we leverage what we've done? So as we create tools and resources, as we create exercise, we call them kind of exercises in a box. How do we get those products out to folks that they can then go ahead and implement? I think similar things with training, right? There's a lot of training that's out there, and so we want to encourage folks to leverage that. We have training that we offer through things like our Fed VTE Enterprise, which focuses on state and local governments and federal government employees so that they can get free training that way. But really, at the end of the day, trying to get as much information and training out there as we can. There's also, as you mentioned, a lot of private sector capacity as well. So we don't, as we talk about training, as we go out there, we talk about a lot of the K through 12 training, we talk about upskilling, reskilling. It's not about using CISAs. It's about using any of the resources that are really out there around the nation. We've done a lot of work with groups like Girls Who Code and NPower and others, where we can actually where we can help support training specifically at underserved communities, at for veterans groups and those transitioning out of the military to get them a career path into cybersecurity. So I think there's a lot of efforts out there, some that CISA offers virtually for free, stuff that we fund through other groups, stuff that industry is funding, stuff that nonprofits have created, stuff that academia is doing. There is so much out there, and I think our role is to encourage folks to take advantage of it, as opposed to take advantage of a particular specific certification or school or product.
Okay, thank you. We'll have one last question.
Abhijit Pandit.
Sorry. Oh.
Go ahead.
We'll do both, I guess.
Key University of Oregon Information Services. As everybody is aware, the economical aspect of ransomware is the frequency keeps increasing. My question is, if University of Oregon is victim of ransomware, what is the latest CISA's recommendation? What kind of a step should we take to deal with that? Very simple question.
So the answer is very simple too. Call us. Call them. They're here in the room. No, I mean, it's to engage with us. We can obviously get our colleagues at the FBI and others involved and to work on this together, right? CISA and the FBI and the U.S. government position is on ransomware, on paying a ransomware simple. We don't recommend people pay ransomware or pay ransoms. That being said, again, it's easy for me here to sit here and say that because we've heard from small businesses that say, I've lost everything and I can't lose everything or I can't shut down my business. So it's not an easy decision to be made. But the earlier we can engage and start those conversations, again, understanding what is the actor, what is the variant that's being used, do we have tools and resources that can help with that variant, and then again, kind of the other aspect of it that we look at it is okay, how do we take the information of what you've seen and get that out to every other academic, institution across the nation to say, we're seeing X, you need to, try to prevent for Y, and we can do that in a way that's also protective of obviously the victim. So. The quickest thing is to get to us, report at CISA.gov, go straight to our 24/7 Ops Center, then they can redirect it out to our team here. You can call our team here directly. If you call the local FBI, they'll call us. If you call us, we'll call them. It really is, we want to try to make it, not here's 57 people to call in this order, on these numbers, give them these, passcodes and, and the right decoder ring, and then you can get in. Call one of us, you've called all of us, and we'll bring the resources to bear.
Thank you. You want to?
Okay, I'll just ask
Yes,
a
go
question.
ahead.
So it truly has been over the past few years seeing, folks work in cybersecurity, and Jose and his team are incredibly, passionate about this, but it can feel very overwhelming. And it's a 24/7 job. They're very committed, and it can be very stressful. So what tips do you have for folks in this room who are all dealing with this in terms of not being overwhelmed or dealing with stress?
Sure. So, I mean, I think this is a field and an area that is always going to be under-resourced and understaffed, right? We're never going to meet that mark of where we need to be. So I think, looking at stress, looking at mental health, looking at making sure that we're taking care of ourselves truly is important. I think it's very easy to get caught up in the operational tempo of what we're doing. We've done things within our organization where we've actually gotten tools and apps that you can download to give people the ability to kind of find that right relaxation. We've tried to do things like altering schedules, right, where we kind of try to minimize meetings on certain days or really try to eliminate those type of things to give people the space to breathe, the space to focus on their family, the space to focus on themselves. I mean, my thing is I'd rather have somebody with us for 10 to 15 years, at 90 miles an hour than somebody for, 3 years at 150 miles an hour, right? And trying to find that right balance. I think it really is organization specific on what you can do. Obviously, governments have a little bit more limitations than the private sector, than academia and nonprofits and those types of things. But it's putting people first. You know, we have a huge focus within CISA right now on people first, and how do we focus on the workforce and the culture. How do we empower supervisors, managers, and executives to give people the space to focus on themselves? How do we leverage things like telework and remote work more effectively? How do we give people, you know, if you're not sitting in traffic for 2 hours each way to work and back, it makes you a better, happier person sometimes, right? So how do we leverage some of those types of resources? And the technology today allows us to do that. Right? I mean, we don't have to necessarily be in the office for all that we do. So it really is looking at your organizational unit, understanding what flexibilities you have, and then I think to the senior leaders in the room, it's making sure you're setting that expectation of your team, that you're also demonstrating that as well. You know, it's very easy to say, well, we're going to tell everyone to do this, but I'm still going to hold my meetings, right? You need to take that step back as well. You need to disconnect on vacations. You need to do those types of things. And everything from like forcing people to take leave. Like we really encourage people to take leave. You've earned it, take it. But I really think, I worry heavily about, I think, the mental health situation in the nation, not just from a workforce perspective. I worry, frankly, about the clinical capacity perspective, you know, which has diminished significantly over the last couple of decades, but I think was kind of exacerbated by COVID. You know, it's hard for people to even get into mental health providers these days if they need that type of services and care. And we really need to look at protecting our workforce and getting into the right culture that allows people to have that right work-life balance and to be able to be, you know, productive members of the organization. And that we can only do that with intent, and we can only do that at the, you know, highest levels of the organization. I can say within CISA, you know, our director is a personally a very strong advocate of this, and that's what permeates down in the organization. So when we recently started a thing where on one Friday of the month, we don't do any scheduled meetings. We let people actually just focus on getting the work done, and that's from her down. So, you know, when it's from her down, we don't have a choice, right? We're going to follow, we're going to do it. And so I think that there's things like that we can do, but I really worry about the op-tempo. I worry about the pace. I was in a city in the Midwest where I met their security operations center. It was one person. Now, the person seemed like a great person. I mean, I have nothing against the person. But, you know, I'm assuming he sleeps at night, right? So how is an entire city's security operations center one person? And now what is that person going to sleep with? What are they waking up with? What are they spending their 7 days a week with? You know, so it's those types of things that, you know, we need to address with intent. Part of that is the workforce. Part of that is people coming through programs, coming into the workforce, alleviating that burden so that we can get more folks in. Some of that is funding and telling the right story so we can fund public and private sector organizations effectively enough to get the workforce where we need to be. It's not a single solution, but I think, you know, if we look at all these different aspects, we can then get that to a much better place. I know it was a very long answer, I apologize.
So thank you, Deputy Director. This has been a great conversation. I would hope to see you at our next OCRS event in the future. So please, let's just give a round of applause for Deputy Director.
Thanks for having us.